Hello and welcome to my little corner of the internet. My name is Fate, pronouns are they, them, and I'm coming to you from the beautiful Squamish, Musqueam, and Slave-Tooth Nation, commonly or colonially known as Vancouver, British Columbia. Today I'd like to introduce myself and talk a little bit about what inspired me to write the book, and how my process of writing the book was. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So my name is Fayte, Fayte, and I am an author for Three Little Sisters Publishing. And with that, I wrote a book called Knitting is Witchcraft, which was released or for pre-order on September 12th of this year. Knitting is Witchcraft came to me when I was having a bit of an emotional upheaval. I was institutionalized for mental health, and I had to stay a week in the psych ward. While I was in there, I would plop myself in front of the nurse's station and I would just knit. I'd knit. And when everybody would walk by me and just sit, and you could tell that people were calmer, people were more receptive, people that weren't really social became social. And I was able to mitigate some of the feelings I was having being cooped up in a place that had not a lot of windows. So when I got out, I started teaching knitting and crochet because people were so interested in it. And I work for foundations that help underprivileged youth, and I teach them knitting and crochet, and it's a lot of fun and I love it. So with that, I started thinking about the correlation between knitting and witchcraft. I saw an article about these glass knitting needles that are at, I want to say, the Edinburgh Witchcraft Museum. Now, I could be wrong, but I know there's a witchcraft museum that has glass knitting needles. And I was thinking, knitting needles and wands aren't too different. And then I was like, well, there's a whole Greek mythos about the fates literally weaving and threading the fate of humanity. And I was like, well, that's kind of like knitting. We're creating something out of nothing, and we make these stories and we have these emotions, and we put all that into our knitting and our crochet when we create it. Now, I am mostly a knitter, so I talk more about knitting, but it doesn't mean that any fiber art is without its merits and is just as valid and is just as spiritually fulfilling as knitting is. And that's kind of what I wanted to get across in my book. If you would like to learn how to do patterns, learn about gods and goddesses, learn about the history of knitting and witchcraft, definitely get my book, Knitting is Witchcraft, by Fayte Shuck and Larissa Hunter at Three Little Sisters Publishing. Three Little Sisters Publishing is an indie publishing house run by, which is women owned and run, and it's absolutely amazing. And my process with it was great. They were very understanding. I am neurodivergent. I needed a lot of time, and I moved like 4 times when I was writing the book. So they were very understanding of that, gave me a lot of time and guidance. Now, this is my first book that I've ever written, which means, this is the first time being published. And with that, they were very understanding and very helpful. A little bit about me is I grew up in Bellingham, Washington, and my mom's Canadian, my dad's American, and I am a Canadian citizen now and have been for the past 15 years. And growing up, I stayed a lot of time at my grandparents' house in the country, and farm life really influenced how I navigated the world as an adult, to the point where I've worked on a farm and I've lived on a farm. And I've lived and worked on a farm for about 5 years. I lived and worked on a farm, and I worked on a farm milking water buffalo for a year. And yes, this was all in, Vancouver area. So growing up with my grandparents, that was my area of strength. That was my place of strength and solitude. It's where I could be most authentically myself. I spent a lot of times out in the creek looking for fairies and running from cows and being chased by chickens. And I learned so much from it. One of the things I like talking about to people is intergenerational trauma and gifts. So one of the intergenerational traumas I can have and that I explain to people is I'm terrified of pigs. Always have been, probably always will be. And I didn't know why. And then when I was doing my genealogy, I found out that my great great grandfather from Ukraine, when he moved to Canada when he was about 45, had a massive heart attack while chasing his pigs who got out of their fence. So that's how intergenerational trauma or ancestral trauma can work, because it's something that I never met him. He died in the 1940s, and I'm still afraid of pigs. And there was no reason for it. There was, all I ever was introduced to was cute little piglets, and they just scared me. So with knowing that, I know we have intergenerational and ancestral gifts. I come from a line of master weavers. When we moved to Canada, that didn't continue. My baba is Czechoslovakian, and she comes from master weavers. And, that's really cool, because when I picked up the needles, I had no connection to my ancestral or really my family. I never knew that my great grandma and my oma used to knit while they watched me when I was in my infancy. So when I took up knitting, I was like, I was a fish in water, which is funny because I'm a Pisces, double Pisces, hey. So I was like a fish in water, right? It was my natural habitat. And I learned how to knit when I was 14. I was going through a major upheaval in my life. I was going through a lot of issues, bullying, some emotional and intimate trauma. And my friend was like, hey, like, I knit and it's really soothing for me. How about you learn? So they taught me, and it was something I was always interested in. I like slow fashion. I always made my own clothes and created things. And so being able to create through knitting was really fun. And I liked it more than sewing because it's faster and it's more consistent. So I started knitting, and then once I became what is considered an expert with knitting, with expertise in anything, it takes about 5,000 hours. Now I've put in my 5,000 hours. I've been knitting since I was 14. I'm 31 now, so that's 15 years, and or 15 or 16 years, and I've never looked back. Every time something goes wrong, right, or maintains in my life, I always pick up knitting. I always am knitting something, whether it's intuitive knitting, which is just knitting that I create the patterns myself and I just pick up the needles and make something, or it's following a pattern. I always have relied on knitting. And when I got good enough at knitting, I started to learn to crochet and teach crochet. And I'm very basic with crochet, but I still teach it because the best way to learn something is to teach someone else. And in my classes, they're very non-hierarchical, which means just because I'm the facilitator doesn't mean we're not learning as much from you as, you're learning from me. And you're allowed to teach other students or I call them my classmates. You can teach the classmates what you've learned if you feel like they can teach better than I am. Sometimes you're not going to, I work with a lot of neurodivergent people, and they're not always going to pick up what I'm putting down. So it's great that we can come together and discuss things in a more holistic way. So as I was saying, I moved to Canada, and it was really hard for me. I was struggling with addiction issues and emotional dysregulation. I ended up getting sober for about a year, and then I maintained an on and off addiction from the time of I was 18 to the time I was 27. When I was 27, I had gotten a pretty large surgery, and that surgery gave me some medications that I was assured were non-addicting, and they opened up a whole new world of pain for me. And with that, I became dependent on medications and mood and mind altering substances. So when June of that year came around, of 2022, I had become incredibly dehydrated and was having withdrawals. And I was detoxing, which led me to having the worst headache of my life. And I spent 3 days in and out of hospitals getting IV fluids, MRIs, and CAT scans because it felt like I was on a boat. I couldn't maintain my balance. I couldn't maintain anything. I was throwing up. It was just an awful time. And I remember having this come to Jesus moment, for a colloquial term, that I was like, this isn't how I'm going to die. I'm not dying alone in a hospital by myself where no one knows I'm here. So I got sober, and it's been 3 and a bit years, and I attribute my sobriety to my ability to write the book. I would have never had the want or need to write the book if I hadn't have gotten sober and aligned myself with my spiritual practice. I have been researching witchcraft since I was 9 years old, but I never really practiced because I never felt that any of the written and known practices of witchcraft I really identified with. It wasn't until I started doing intuitive witchcraft that I felt that I could continue on with my spiritual practices. So intuitive witchcraft is witchcraft in which you trust divine ordinance and providence for continuing your studies, your craft, and your spell working. So one of the things is when I collect specifically cedar and pine sap, I sing to the trees. No one's told me to do this. It was something I felt innately inside me that I needed to do. And that's how I give offering. Offerings don't have to be physical things. It could be like physically giving like an offering of food or drink or presents. You can use your voice. You can clean up the land. You can trim and keep unruly vegetation. You know, a little goes a long way when it comes to offering to the spirits of the land. And for me, I trust my innate wisdom and my connection with the divine to do offerings and how I navigate offerings. And that's how I navigate my witchcraft practice. Now, I identify as a witch. For most people, I just say I'm pagan. Paganism is just the easiest one. People see that as religion, even though it's more of a reclamation of old ways. And I am definitely into the reclamation of the old ways. I am part of the Slavic diaspora and the Appalachian. I don't know if the Appalachian diaspora works, but I'm part of Appalachian ancestry. And I am slowly fixing the Christian wound inside me. I grew up in a very totalitarian Christian home where God's word was the only word, and God punished those who didn't believe in him. And it was very fearful. So when I found out that I could have a loving, kind, and caring God who wanted what's best for me and, you know, had the ability to create change as long as I sought the guidance, things really opened up for me spiritually. I was able to understand what I needed as a spiritual person. I believe that we all have the divine inside us, and we just have to look inside through prayer and meditation to figure out what we need and how we can navigate life. And that's, I do talk about it a little bit in my book, but it took a long time to come to that spiritual level and that spiritual understanding. So to get back to who I am, is I am the oldest of 9. I have 1 half brother, 3 half sisters, a stepsister, and 3 stepbrothers. And like I said, I am the oldest, and they're different parents. So the bulk of the kids were with my dad and my 2 stepmoms, and my half brother is just my mom and my stepdad. And I really hated being a sibling. My parents weren't together when I was a baby, and I felt like the kids were going to take away from me. Like, I was excited for my baby brother, but once my sister came around, I was like, But now, I am so happy to be a sister, and I love my family so much. And it's really changed how I see children. I wasn't originally going to have kids. I didn't want them. And I have some chronic health issues in which I can't, or at least we thought I couldn't have kids. And so my baby is a miracle baby. And I was very sick. We didn't think he was going to make it. And he ended up being premature by a month and super healthy and at a healthy weight. And, he's trucking along very nicely. I also have 2 cats, Rambo the Rambunctious and Noodle the Noodlebrink. And, me and my partner have a lovely life that we've built with each other. But I wouldn't have that if I didn't put my sobriety and God first. So I say God, higher power, the divine, because I want to be inclusive, but because if God is everything, he is also nothing. And yes, I use gendered terms, like I said, a little bit of a Christianity hangover. But I would rather have God be everything and honor the divine in me. I would like to do more videos like this and tell you a little bit more about me. So I think, as a double Pisces, I'm an open book. I would love to do Q&As and ask me anything. So if you liked this video, please tell me what you would like to know about me, and I will compile a list and we can do a question and answers video in my next video. So I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Enjoy this beautiful weekend, and it's the little things that make life wonderful. Bye for now.